Hi everyone. If you're listening to this at 2 a.m., then maybe you're like me, tired. Not necessarily physically tired, but the kind of weariness that itches somewhere deep in your mind. Tired enough to just want someone to sit next to you and tell a long story. Long enough that you could fall asleep halfway through. So, I'm going to tell you about a day. Not the day of a king, not the day of a hero, but the day of someone absolutely no one remembers. A slave. Nameless, powerless, idealless. Just a broom, a bucket, and a philosopher boss named Plato. Yes, that's right, Plato, the great thinker of humanity. And you. You're the one mopping his floors, the one dumping out dog pee while he talks about the tripartite soul, the one bringing him morning tea while he argues with himself. I'll take you back to Athens, around 380 BCE, a morning when the sun hasn't risen, but philosophy is already stretching its limbs. Before we begin, if you truly feel this is a cozy place to hide in the middle of the night, give this a like and subscribe, only if you really want to. No pressure, like the rules in an old tavern. You only stay if you need a quiet spot. And you know what I love the most? Seeing the comments, finding out where you're listening from and what time it is there, whether it's New York or Norway. Mem, or 5, you're still here. And I see you. Now, turn off the lights. Maybe turn on a small fan if you've got one. Not because it's hot, but for that soft humming sound. You open your eyes. There's no alarm. Just a soft groan from your back, where you negotiated all night with a straw that was too sharp. Last night, you had a dream, not flying or falling, but something like constitutional reform in Athens. You saw yourself in a grand hall, surrounded by free citizens, everyone in white robes, curly hair, loud voices, and impressively dignified. You're also in a white robe, slightly stained with yesterday's porridge. It's fine. You sit, quiet, and wait. Someone stands up and shouts, "We must discuss justice." You raise your hand. You have thoughts. You're ready to share your perspective, the one who always cleans up after debates. But then, someone points at you and says, "Oh, he's in the wrong seat. Get him up there to re-mop the podium." The crowd nods in agreement. Yeah, the podium's a bit dirty. Without a clean platform, ideals can't stand straight. You get up, pick up the rag, and wipe. In your dream. You wake up still smelling wet wood from the podium in your dream. Or maybe it's the floor of Plato's room. Hard to tell. All you know is, even in your dreams, you weren't allowed to speak. You chuckle softly. Not sadly. Just the kind of laugh people with no choices reserved for the universe. The ceiling above you is made of stone, dry olive branches, and hope. A fragile hope that today, maybe you won't have to clean dog poop more than 3 times. A murky kind of faith, like the faint light creeping through a curtain that smells faintly of oil smoke. You shift. Your body doesn't complain anymore, not because it's better, but because it stopped filing reports. It's accepted it. This is its life straw bed, side sleeping. Philosophy from a man who's never scrubbed his own feet. You glance around the room, Plato's bedroom, which looks more like an unsorted library than a resting place for humans. Morning here isn't quiet. It's the kind of quiet with sound. The sound of unfinished theories and half-baked philosophies. Outside the porch, the first sparrow sings a low note, as if it too doubts reality. From downstairs, the hinge creaks, like it's complaining about supporting an unjust society. In the corner, a cracked clay jar pops quietly, maybe from temperature change, or maybe it overheard Plato's logic still unresolved from last night. You tiptoe past scrolls. The wooden floor groans under your step, each creak like a sigh, whispering, "Here we go again." No one speaks, but everything in the house murmurs in its own way. They don't need anyone to listen, because no one ever has. A morning when no one wakes you, but everything else does. There's a hard wooden bed covered in a faded wool blanket, the kind that might have been white if you hadn't lived here long enough to know better. Bookshelves stacked from floor to ceiling like leaning towers of logic. One nudge and they'll collapse, like arguments with no evidence. An old oil lamp that burns all night. He calls it the light of truth. You think, it just makes this place smell faintly like half-burned enlightenment. A small terracotta statue, weird shape, square head, short legs, sits on the desk. Plato says it's the idealized form of self-aware humanity. You think it looks like a dog that's been compressed by disappointment. In the corner, Plato is sitting, not sitting like a normal person, sitting like someone who just saw a copy of an idea. He stares at a shadow on the wall, murmuring to the universe. Do you think that shadow believes it's me? You haven't brushed your teeth. You haven't had water. You're not even fully awake. But you know one thing. It's another day. You stand up, bump your head on the low beam, like every morning. Before you reach the kitchen, your stomach lets out a long, deep sound full of opinions. It's not hunger in a poetic way. It's the kind of hunger that smelled fresh bread from a rich man's yard and returned to watery porridge that needs cooling. You dig in the corner looking for leftover crumbs, only find a small scrap of parchment. On it, Plato wrote last week, no one should eat until they understand the nature of hunger. You stare at it, you stare at your stomach, you fold the paper and chew it. You don't swear, because you've learned your first philosophical lesson. The body hurts, but thought is what truly lasts. You head to the door. On the way, you trip over a scroll, thick, heavy, handwritten. Its title something like, Why the Just Man Should Rule and the Unjust Should Take an Ethics Class. You place it back on the table and start your first job of the day. Make tea for the man who talks to a shadow. And you know, that shadow's lucky. At least it doesn't have to clean poop. You wash your hands, light the fire, prepare the mint tea, the only thing left in the house that still smells nice. And as the water boils, Plato speaks again. Do you think scent is a form of knowledge? You don't answer. You're too busy remembering where you left the silver spoon. Might have been the dog. The dog named Doubt, an unpaid cast member who always manages to steal the spotlight. The day begins. No drum, no music. Just Plato's breath, the crackle of fire, and the sound of your soul trying to breathe evenly. Good morning. Athens, good morning. Philosophy, good morning. World where thoughts soar, and you scrub the floor with a worn-out brush and one unanswered question. Who am I, besides the best tea maker no one remembers? After the first sip of tea, Plato sits silently. Then he turns to the stone wall beside him, an old wall, stained with the cracks of time. You think he might complain about the weather, or ask about bread, but no. He says, have you ever thought that you yourself are just a projection of an ideal wall in the world of forms? He's talking to the wall. And the wall, of course, doesn't respond, but in that moment, you swear one of the cracks quivered. You were about to walk out, but no, this is the good part. Plato continues. You stand there, unmoving, enduring, but also limited. So who is truly free, you or me? You lower your head, keep wiping the cup. Wipe like you're trying to erase your own existence. Every morning, he chooses something to debate philosophy with. Yesterday, it was the neighbor's cat. The day before, it was a stick, but today, it's the wall. You think, at least the wall doesn't walk off halfway through. This isn't the first time. You once saw Plato talk to a kettle in the kitchen. He asked, "You're boiling, but are you truly hot, or just reacting to external conditions?" Once, he debated with a single bean that had fallen to the floor. Did you fall because you're free, or because my hand trembled? The highlight was last week. Plato argued with a chair. If no one sits on you, are you still a chair? Aren't he, or just an object waiting for a purpose? You just stood there, dusting, and wondered, if I don't clean, am I still a servant, or am I temporarily someone doing nothing? He turns to you. Do you know if that shadow on the wall is truly me, or just a reflection of me? You look at him. You look at the shadow. You look at the wall. Then you look at the rag in your hand. You're about to say something deep, but then you think, to answer someone talking to a wall, you need more than just knowledge. You lower your head, pour more tea, and the wall, still standing, loyal, silent, philosophical. You think, in this house, the wall has the most soul, never judges, never leaves halfway, never asks why you haven't cleaned the yard. It just stands there, witnessing everything, absorbing every unanswered question, and never mentioning the cup you broke yesterday. The wall was there when Plato shouted, "Justice cannot exist unless one understands oneself." The wall was also there when he cried alone after Aristotle said, "You're wrong, teacher." You've leaned your head against the wall after a long day and whispered, "If he asks the shadow again, I'm going to scream." The wall listened. Didn't reply, but didn't leave either. If you had to pick your best friend in the house, it's not Plato, it's the wall. You haven't eaten. Plato is philosophically full. And then, like every morning, the first debate begins. Not with you, with someone or something, present enough for Plato to unload questions on. And today's victim is the silver spoon. The silver spoon, or as Plato calls it, the reflective tool of material need, has been the subject of 3 full lectures. You've named it eudaimonia, meaning supreme happiness, because it's the only object Plato never throws when angry. It lies there, glimmering philosophically, not breathing, not speaking, yet interrogated like a newly published thinker. You swear, if it had a face, it would have cringed halfway through the second definition. If you are a spoon, do you know whether you serve or are being exploited? You're washing glasses, but your ears perk up because you know the next line will be aimed at you. Without fail, what do you think? He turns to you. You furrow your brow. About what exactly? Plato raises an eyebrow, slightly disappointed, as if you just declined a role in his play. About the existence of function-bearing objects lacking self-awareness. You don't know what to say. Because if you answer wrong, he'll lecture for an hour. But if you answer right, he'll lecture for 2. You scratch your head. It might be like me. His eyes light up. Exactly. Precisely. You've grasped it. You are the embodiment of a subject not yet self-aware. But on the journey, you just turned yourself into an example. You just threw yourself into the deep hole of examples. You start seeing everything around you through the lens of reluctant philosophy. That chipped bowl. Is it still a bowl? Are you still a person if you don't get to choose when you eat? A kind of hunger rises not just from your belly, but from doubt. If I don't have time to think, do I even truly exist? You used to think existence was clear. But now, under Plato's gaze, you feel blurry, like the shadow on the wall, formed but undefined. You hold the spoon, and suddenly feel like you're holding the philosophical burden of mankind. And thus, the lecture begins. While the tea cools, while your stomach growls, while the dog lies under the table, resting its chin on your foot like it's also about to be quizzed. Plato looks at it and nods. This animal acts by instinct, but that doesn't mean it doesn't contemplate. Perhaps it is the very proof of unspoken consciousness. You think, if he makes it respond, I'll bite before it does. The dog named Doubt sighs, a kind of sigh you know well, not from fatigue, but from being too aware to react. It looks at you, as if to say, see? Told you not to let yourself get dragged into this. Then it turns away, resting its snout again, playing the role of the only creature in the house who knows when to be silent, a role you desperately want to learn. You think, if I eat first, will it be considered unphilosophical? Your stomach doesn't care about theory. It doesn't want beauty, doesn't need truth. It wants porridge, hot. Now, right now, you used to think philosophy could make you forget hunger. Turns out, philosophy just delays it until it arrives like an essay, long, intense, and with no break allowed. You think, Socrates drank poison. I'm about to faint from hunger. Both of us, victims of overheated ideals. Plato says, the spoon does not resist, but that doesn't mean it agrees. You think the debate is over. But no. He looks at the cold fruit plate and declares, we must think carefully before consuming anything unexamined. And he stands up. Walks away. You watch him go, unsure whether to be sad or relieved. All you know is, breakfast is officially postponed. You sigh, look at the food growing cold in philosophy, then decide. You eat. No philosophy, no pondering, no metaphors, just eat, because your stomach is not Plato's disciple. The dog looks up, as if asking, can I eat now, or do I need to pass a logic test? You give it half the bread. No reason needed, because in this house full of ideals, at least two creatures still know what hunger is. You look at the spoon, look at yourself, look at the breakfast growing colder, and nod. Yes, master, but it's not hungry either. There's no breakfast, but philosophy is overflowing. You know what comes next. Washing. The robe. Plato wears nothing but his toga. That ankle-length white robe he calls the material form of living intellect. But living intellect gets dirty. Very dirty. Especially when he sits on anything. From dusty steps to the neighbor's sheep pen, to listen to the sound of wool in the wind. You carry the wooden basin, fill it with water, and shake out the robe. This robe isn't just fabric. It's a living witness to 3 arguments with Aristotle. 1 stumble at the city gate, and 1 night Plato slept outside because his bedroom door was locked. You once heard him say that this was the robe he received when he was young, during a debate where he got more applause than tomatoes. And he called it the golden age of material and will. You thought, the material is frayed, the will is mud-stained, and oh, Olympus. There's a brown stain at the collar. Plato says it's the mark of midnight contemplation. A faint green smear near the hem. He says it came from a discussion with a skeptic philosopher in a garden with olive trees. You think it's sweat, dirt, and olive oil from when he fell asleep at the table. But no one washes a stain if its creator believes it's a symbol. You scrub harder and wonder if every stain is a thought. How many philosophies are you washing out? Plato peeks over again. You're using force, but is it force that cleans or focus? You sigh, hand still working. If this were an exam in applied practical philosophy, you're getting a B+. He stands still for a moment, then nods. Don't just wash with your hands, wash with your heart. You almost drop the robe. You think, I'm already washing with my spleen. Master. You pause for a moment and see a small tear near the shoulder. Arm, you reach for needle and thread, but Plato appears behind you like the ghost of unfinished ideals. Do you see? It is in the tearing that the soul reveals itself. You stay silent, because if you say something like, shall I mend it? He'll say, no, leave it. As a reminder of imperfection, so you leave it. The robe stays torn, and you keep washing it imperfectly, like your own life. It's as heavy as the 3rd argument in the Republic, and it smells like ideals forgotten in a basement. You scrub, shake, ring, and wonder, if justice is cleanliness, am I enforcing the law? The dog nearby snores, unhelpfully. Plato walks by, nodding. You know, the robe, like the soul, must be cleansed regularly. But not everyone is willing to put their hands in the water. You don't know if that's a compliment or shade. All you know is your hands are now colder than the faith of a young person hearing Greek philosophy for the first time. You hang the robe on a line between two stone columns. It flaps wildly, as if lecturing sparrows on morality. You look up and think, does wisdom dry faster than underwear? And then, as always, Plato raises his head from afar. Do you know, once ideals are exposed to sunlight, they lose some of their grandeur? You don't reply. You just grab a clothespin and fasten the hem to the line. Because no matter how lofty the ideal, it can still fly away if the wind is strong enough. This morning's wind is fierce. A gust whips the robe like a battle flag of a philosophical army. The fabric flaps, almost slapping you in the face. You lunge to catch it, wet hands slipping, feet sliding, nearly crashing onto the stone floor. Plato looks up from afar. Do you see? Ideals should not be left to the wind. You pant, heart pounding like you've just been awakened by truth, or the fear of starting laundry all over again. You grip the hem tightly, add 2 more clothespins, and whisper, 1 more inch, and your ideal would have landed on the dog's head. You sit on the 3-legged stool, the sturdiest chair in the house, simply because it hasn't broken during any philosophical debate. In front of you is a bowl of boiled beans. No salt, no greens, nothing to brag about except they're beans. Plato says, simplicity is the foundation of all ideals. You look at the beans, then at him, then at your stomach, which is staging a protest in waves. Pretty sure this foundation's a bit mouldy. Master. You scoop the first spoonful, trying to swallow it like a difficult lesson. But your mouth isn't here to study philosophy. It knows what social injustice tastes like. You look into the bowl. The beans lie there, silent, chaotically arranged, but full of philosophical potential. Plato nods. Each bean is a unit of existence, a concept, a being. You think, which one represents my regret for sitting down to eat with him? He points to a big bean. That's truth. Then to a shriveled one. That's imperfection. And a burnt one. That proves all systems have flaws. You almost laugh, but manage to swallow. Not out of respect for philosophy, but because you're afraid a bean might shoot up your nose. A bean falls to the floor. Plato sees it. You freeze. He says, do you see, falling is the inevitable result of losing the center? You nod, as if enlightenment just hit you. Actually, your jaw is tired from chewing. The dog, Doubt, sits nearby, eyes fixed on the bowl with the expression of one who's witnessed war and now sees something worse. You think, am I eating to live or living to eat this? Plato tells a story. A lunch with Socrates. A story about the philosophy of meals, how the mouth can lie too. You look at the bean on your spoon, and it feels like it's hitting you with truth. One bean gets stuck between your back teeth. You wince. Plato nods. Pain, but with meaning. You think, what meaning can be drawn from lunch with 7 dry beans? You force a smile. Because if you don't smile, you might scream. But you don't scream. You just keep eating, spoon by spoon. As if each bite contains a little dignity, boiled through. You sigh. And the beans, still there, as many as your unanswered questions. A light breeze comes through the window, you don't know from where. But it lifts a few beans from the bowl, sending them rolling like awakened philosophical questions. Plato jolts, eyes following a bean darting across the table. Do you see? Knowledge, if not placed in a sturdy bowl, can be blown away by any force. You sweat. Maybe we should change the bowl. He shakes his head. No. We must change our thinking. A bean lands on your foot. You bend down, pick it up, and think, if knowledge flies that easily, maybe I should always keep a lid on when it's windy. The dog, Doubt, shakes its head, unclear if from boredom or the wind messing up its ear fur. It walks over to the bowl, takes a deep sniff, then walks away like it just smelled cold philosophy. You offer it a bean, hoping to share the suffering. It glances at you, eyes foggy, as if asking, do you still have any self-respect? Then it backs away, lies down, places its snout on your foot and sighs. A sigh weighted like 3 arguments about existential disappointment. Plato sees this, nods. It reacts by instinct, but that too is a form of rebuttal. You nod and whisper, and I am rebutting with my entire digestive system. You set the spoon down for a moment. Not because you're full, but because your brain has just hit a new limit. Imagination. You close your eyes, letting your mind drift, and suddenly see yourself elsewhere. A round table, clean linens, silver plates, a smooth glass of wine, golden pastries. Someone asks you, would you like anything else? You smile. No worries, no philosophy, no dog staring into your soul. Just soft music and the gentle aroma of actual food. You open your eyes, still beans, Plato still talking, and the smell, still boiled knowledge. You pick the spoon up again, not because you're hungry, but because now you understand. There's no perfect lunch, only dreams that make beans feel worse. And then it hits, not hunger, but a mid-meal existential crisis. You look at the bowl, then your hand, trembling slightly. You suddenly see your entire life in this bowl, simple, bland, and no one asked if you wanted it. You blow a sharp breath, hoping to blow away the thought. But all it does is blow more beans. Plato turns back, as if he just heard your brainwave crash. How do you feel, sitting in front of a reality with no choice? You whisper. Feels like eating beans. He nods. Satisfied, then walks away, leaving you alone with the sadness contained in the bottomless bowl of self-reflection. You think, If lunch is a metaphor for life, then I must be in the part without source. Lunch passes, like everything else in your life. No one records it, no one applauds it, and absolutely no one asks how you feel. You wash the dishes, hands soaking in cold water, mind adrift somewhere between memory and assumption. Suddenly, a very soft sound echoes inside your head, not Plato's voice, not a lecture, but a memory. A very gentle voice, someone you once met, or maybe just overheard, asking you, if I lived my whole life without ever being asked anything, did I ever really exist? You remember the moment. A winter night, dim lights, the quiet footsteps of a slave sweeping the yard. You don't remember their name. Maybe you never knew. But you remember the eyes that once smiled at you, not big, not long, just like an oil lamp flickering in the wind. Once, just once, and then they stopped smiling. Only stillness remained, steady and absent, as if that person had learned to turn themselves off without making a sound. No one noticed when that gaze changed. No one asked why, and you, back then, didn't ask either. No one noticed. No one answered. But the question still echoes, falling like raindrops into straw, and staying there. You didn't answer then, and even now, you still haven't. But since that day, you began to hear silence differently, no longer as emptiness, but as a kind of language. Slow, voiceless, but with shape, with weight, with intention. You realize some people speak through lowered eyes, some ask by tapping their fingers on wood, and some sadnesses only need to stand next to you, and you already understand what's being said, without words. You started to be more silent too, not because you had nothing left to say, but because you began learning the language no one teaches, no one asks for, but everyone needs, the language of presence. And while learning that language, you suddenly remembered your mother, the only woman who ever asked you, not what did you do, or were you right, but a question so simple it haunts you. Are you tired? Not when you were sick, not when you fell, but in the moments you were quiet, and she knew that quiet wasn't peace. Her voice used to come like a soft cloth placed on your forehead, not pushing, not probing, just arriving at the right time. And maybe, from her, you learned something no book could teach. Listening to someone doesn't begin with ears, but with the heart. And you started realizing something else. Upstairs, Plato debates ideas, pure forms, the supreme good. Down in the kitchen, you're washing dishes with cold water and trying to keep one question from fading. Upstairs, people talk about eternal truth. Downstairs, someone's trying to boil water, but the fire keeps fading. Plato's philosophy may soar to the heavens, but the philosophy of the kitchen floor is what pulls you back to the ground, where every question doesn't need an answer, just someone to hear it. Where every concept is wrapped in tiny acts, pouring water, drying dishes, placing them back in order. You think, Maybe not everyone has a philosophy to share, but everyone has a philosophy. It just doesn't live in books. You look up at the kitchen ceiling in Plato's house, where wooden beams twist like a maze, where even the loudest question might get stuck in the dust of knowledge that never touched those downstairs. You smile, not a happy smile, but the kind of smile that comes from understanding. A question doesn't need an answer. It just needs not to be forgotten. You dry your hands, gently place the last dish on the shelf, and in that short moment, you feel like you've completed a ritual. No one saw it, but you know something was held onto. Maybe no one asks how you are today. Maybe no one says your name in the conversations, but at least you still remember that question. And because of that, maybe you're still someone, but just before you leave the kitchen, you stop. Just for a moment, a tiny pause and whisper, "I see you." No one hears. No reply. But the words don't need to be answered. They just need to be said. Like a small prayer for all the questions no one asks. A tiny echo in the lower levels of the house of knowledge, where humans don't need to be defined. They just need to be seen. You step out of the kitchen and see it lying at the doorway, as if it's been waiting for you all along. An old dog, grey and dusty, eyes neither happy nor sad. Its name is Doubt. No one really remembers who named it. Some say Plato did, as a joke. Some say the dog named itself by sitting quietly and staring at whoever was talking, as if they were wrong. You and it look at each other. No tail wagging, no barking, no growling. Just two beings coexisting in the gap between questions. There was once a time Plato kicked it out of the debate room. He was presenting a point about the immortal soul, and the dog yawned. Didn't growl, didn't interrupt, just one perfectly timed yawn. Plato blushed, pointed to the door, and said, "It disrupts the purity of thought." It got up, slowly walked out, without protest, and ever since then, it never entered the room again. It just sits outside, peeking through the gap in the door, still debating through silent presence. Some say philosophy begins with doubt, but perhaps Plato forgot that sometimes doubt takes the shape of a dog. Actually, this isn't the first time it showed up. You've seen it before, right when you were about to say something you didn't understand, or about to agree with an ideal you hadn't felt yet. Sure, it never barked, just sat there, quietly, looking at you with eyes more disorienting than any argument. You once thought you were hallucinating. How could a dog know when you're lying to yourself? But then you realized it doesn't know. It's just there, and its presence alone makes you look again. You sit down beside it, back against the wall. The breeze is light, and philosophy dust floats through beams of sun. It tilts its head slightly, as if asking, "You're still not sure who you are you?" You nod. It lays its head on your thigh, heavier than you expect, like every doubt you've ever had is tucked inside that small skull. How you used to hate it, not because it bit, not because it barked, but because it made you stop believing in anything fully. not even yourself. You once wanted to believe, naively, completely, with ease. To hear a promise and not overthink it. To look into someone's eyes and not wonder, is this real? But every time you tried, it would appear. Sit down, stay silent. Its gaze a mirror, showing you what you didn't want to see. You blamed it, but one day you understood it wasn't stopping you from trusting others. It just didn't want you to lie to yourself. You stroke its back and think, maybe I don't need to be certain. Maybe I just need someone here to doubt with. And maybe, for those with no place in Plato's dialogues, a dog like this is a kindred spirit. Because, as it never said, but you still understood, not everyone who doubts is a traitor. Sometimes, they're just trying to stay loyal to the feeling of not knowing everything yet. You've been trying to delay it all morning. But as with everything in Plato's house, the thing you avoid, the bath, is the thing most emphasized, the tub, a large ceramic basin, cold, and without any concept of warm water. You lean down, your hands trembling as they touch the surface, then pull back, then try again. Plato says, refreshing the soul begins by awakening the body. You think, freezing the body awakens a lot too. You inch in like you're stepping into a debate you haven't prepared for. The water is so cold, you feel like you've fallen into an unedited dialogue. The splash sounds like philosophy cracking. Each drop slaps your skin like a metaphysical question. Who are you? Why are you here? Does freedom exist if you're shivering like steamed fish? And then, as with everything here, you accept it. Not because you understand, but because you're already wet. You sit in the basin, teeth chattering, eyes on the window. Sunlight filters through a thin layer of steam, and you see your reflection, not clear, not certain, but real. You reach down, this time for the soap. It slips from your hand, plops into the water, and sends up a cloud of white bubbles like messy thoughts. You watch the bubbles, swelling, fragile, shimmering, and then, pop. Isn't the ego just like this, you wonder? Expanding when we believe we're right, glowing when under light, but one gentle touch, and gone. You try to catch it, but it's already burst. Like every firm answer you've ever clung to, you lean back, letting the cold water and shattered foam wash off not just your skin, but the arrogance of half-knowing. You suddenly realize Plato and soap have a lot in common. Both slippery, hard to hold on to, and if handled wrong, will fly off. Plato makes you slip from lazy faith. Soap makes you actually slip. Both clean, in their own way. One clears the mind, the other. Your armpits, but at least soap doesn't ask you. What is beauty while you're scrubbing your back? You chuckle softly, because in Plato's house, everything has philosophical potential, even soap. You're no longer sure if you're bathing or testing your patience. The water's still cold, very cold. Every move makes you shrink like a newborn in winter. You count seconds, unconsciously. 1, 2, 3. Then start over. because you forgot what number you reached. You wonder, is enduring a form of meditation? Or are you just too tired to resist anymore? And then, while bracing to wash your hair without freezing your spine, you think, maybe enlightenment doesn't come from answers, but from enduring long enough to stop asking. Plato calls from afar. Beauty begins with purification. You respond, wordlessly. With a sneeze loud enough to count as a rebuttal, you recall a story from an old slave in the house that once Plato didn't bathe for 3 days, not out of laziness, but as an experiment on the smell of existence. He declared he would observe whether people still listened to a philosopher once he started stinking. The result? No one interrupted him, but no one sat close either. Plato learned, ideas must spread, but not literally. Since then, he bathed more regularly, but never mentioned that experiment again. You sit in now cold water. At first, you flinched, breathed heavy, shivered, but now, you just sit, no longer resisting. The water's still cold, but you've stopped thinking about the cold. Your mind drifts into silence. No resistance, no interpretation, no reason. And right there, you realize the moment the cold stops making you shiver is the moment you stop trying to control everything. It's not that the water warmed up, it's that you accepted it. And from that acceptance, maybe comes the first step to understanding Plato, or at least surviving today. You don't know when you nodded off. Maybe it was when your back was still warm after drying off with a rough towel, or when the dog named Doubt curled up at the foot of your bed, breathing steadily. The dream begins with a strange sound. You think it's the wind, but when you listen closely, it's the sound of floor scrubbing, cloth rubbing against stone, repetitive, patient, almost surreal. You're dreaming. But Plato's house still sends someone to clean before the dream starts. In this house, even your subconscious must be orderly. Then something beautiful. You're running through a field. No Plato, no ideals, no debate, just wind and light. You smile, a rare, genuine smile. And then, a cough. Someone adjusts their robe. A familiar voice from afar. What is freedom, if not defined by contradiction? You're pulled from the field. The sun retreats, convinced by Plato that light isn't real. The grass vanishes, replaced by cold stone floor. On it, Plato paces, monologuing with your shadow. Strangely, the shadow talks back. It speaks in your voice, but clearer, more confident, like it's waited forever to debate properly. Plato nods, pushes the questions further, and the shadow responds, fluidly, flawlessly. You stand nearby, watching yourself being quoted, listened to, understood, but it's not really you. You want to cut in, wait. That's not what I meant, but your voice in the dream is weak like mist. You want to scream, this is my dream, but only manage, free, Dom, is. And right then, the dog named Doubt appears. But this time, it flies. No legs, no barking, just hovering around your head, ears flapping like wings. It looks at you, like a human would. Then repeats one sentence. Dream, but don't believe it all. You nod, not because you understand, but because you're too tired to argue with a flying dog. A hand taps your shoulder. You turn. It's Aristotle, younger, but eyes full of doubt. He carries a chalkboard and pencil, scans the dream like he's grading a paper. Good detail, solid plot, but the ending lacks logic. He nods, takes notes, then unexpectedly pulls out a dream evaluation sheet, scored out of 10. You take it. 7.5. Red marks correcting grammar. You want to argue, but Aristotle's already gone, like a substitute teacher clocking out. Every dream begins with illusion, but what makes it believable? You jolt awake, heart pounding. A sweat on your back, though the air is cool. The dog still sleeps. You sit up, stare at the ceiling, and think, when even your dreams are no longer your own, what do you have left? You don't know, but you get up and keep going, because life under Plato's roof doesn't wait for full awakenings. It begins even when your dreams are still unfinished. You thought this morning would be easy. After a night of exhausting dreams and a bath that felt like forced meditation, you assumed, surely, you'd get some rest. But no, today, Plato has a philosophical rehearsal before meeting his students. And you, yes, you, are the only audience. He steps into the main room, sunlight cutting through the grapevines like an ancient stage spotlight. And then he begins a dialogue with himself. If the soul has wings, then why do we still fall? You sit on a low stool, holding a piece of stale bread left from yesterday. After one sentence that somehow makes sense, something about souls and gravity, you accidentally clap just once, softly, but loud enough for Plato to hear. His eyes light up. You agree? Good. I shall now expand with 14 additional points. You freeze. The bread slips from your hand. You wish you'd slapped your own face instead of clapping, just to make this less painful. The air grows heavier. Each question Plato throws feels like a dagger into your waking consciousness. Then he changes his tone, pretending to be a student challenging him. He starts answering himself, interrupting himself, then countering himself again. You watch, partly impressed, mostly bewildered. You think to yourself, if only I had a duplicate of myself like Plato, one to argue, one to nod, and the real me could take a nap. You imagine the scene. 2 clones, one talking, one agreeing, and you, peacefully asleep. Sounds amazing, until you remember. All 3 versions would still have to face Plato's questions. You sigh and think, if this chair had a soul, it would be just as tired as I am. And as if it heard you, the chair creaks. Not because you moved, but as if it wanted to speak. It squeaks each time Plato throws out another question, like a subtle protest. You gently shift your weight. The creaking softens. A silent pact is formed between you and the chair, 2 beings trapped in Plato's solo performance. The dog, doubt, curls in the corner, one eye half open. He doesn't bark, but you're sure he's shaking his head. Then suddenly, he gets up. No sound, no reason. He walks to the door, turns back to look at you once, as if to say, "It's not that I hate philosophy, it's just that I've heard this part 3 times already." The door doesn't creak as it closes. Doubt is gone. You swallow dryly. Now it's just you and Plato. Finally, Plato turns to you, and you. What do you think of that? You jump. The bread hits the floor. Your heart skips 2 beats. You scramble to recall. What was the last question again? Something about, if reality is a shadow, are we truly living, or just waiting for the light to go out? You say, "Sir, I think the light is very beautiful today." Plato nods. Pleased, and you survive another day until he closes the rehearsal with a surprising statement. In the end, desire begins with wheat. You don't understand, but his eyes fall on the bread you dropped. He says nothing, just turns away. And you nudge the bread far, far away, as if you never owned it, whispering to yourself, "From now on, I'm eating potatoes." You thought sleep would be your refuge, but after this morning's rehearsal, as you retreat into a dim corner of the house, hands trembling while you finish drying the ceramic jug, a new thought creeps in. There are things you're not allowed to dream of. You once tried to dream of escape, leaving Athens, going somewhere with no Plato, no philosophy, no freezing mornings where the only thing heated is a question. But when you woke up, you had a handprint on your shoulder. No one in the house confessed, but you knew someone had shaken you awake mid-dream, as if to say, "No." You once dreamed of asking your own questions, like, "If I'm not allowed to be anyone, can I at least be wind?" Then you, in the dream, were stopped by another version of yourself. That question hasn't been approved. You once dreamed of not being yourself. Not the one who washes jars, chops vegetables, scrubs the feet of philosophy, but a leaf, quietly drifting in the wind, unnamed, unasked. You floated above the rooftops of Athens, over Plato's head, over tangled questions under the sun. You were nearly free, until a voice rang out from the very sky of your dream. Then what is the essence of a leaf? You had no answer. And the dream vanished, like a lantern whose wick had burned out. You once dreamed inside a dream of writing a poem, not for anyone, not for anything, just to prove to yourself that you could still say something without needing a thesis. You wrote with your finger on imaginary fabric, letters appearing in moonlight, no rhyme, no metaphors, just, "I am me when I am no one." Then the moon turned red. A grading sheet dropped in front of you, handwritten. Red ink, weak metaphor, lacks coherence, temporarily not approved. You looked closely. It was signed by Plato. You woke up with your hand on your chest, like someone who just failed an exam. You once dreamed of your mother, the only one who ever asked, "Are you tired?" And just as she reached out, a shout rang out. Incorrect structure, like a whip through fog. You dropped to your knees, hands over your head, not from pain, but from understanding. Some dreams, here, are censored too. You once dreamed of no one touching you and felt relief. Not because you hated anyone, but because, for once, you wanted to lie down without being called, questioned, or lectured. You lay in a strange field, wind brushing your hair, feeling like you weren't a being of obligation, not anything, but still whole. Then, in the wind, you heard familiar footsteps. You opened your eyes, no one there, just a scroll at your feet, with writing. There is no neutral state in existence. You woke up, neck cold like someone had just been standing there. You knew someone wouldn't let you dream in peace. You once dreamed of Plato crying, no teaching, no questioning, just sitting by the window, hands trembling, holding a book with no words. He said, "If all knowledge is empty, then what do we exist for?" You didn't reply. I just quietly placed your hand on his shoulder, and for the first time, he didn't push you away. The dream was so calm, you wanted to stay forever. Then you woke up. Your forehead was cold. There was a purple ink mark. Insufficient argumentation. No one claimed they wrote it, but you knew. It didn't appear on its own. You've never dreamed of yourself without fear. In rare dreams where you are truly you, not a slave, not a tool, you often see your own eyes staring back from a watery mirror. At first, it's a relief. Ah, that's really me. But then you realize you don't know what to say to yourself. You look and feel as empty as a question without a subject, just as you try to speak. The reflection says first, you're allowed to exist, but not allowed to know why. You bolt upright in bed, cold sweat clinging to your neck, and for the first time, you wish you were someone else. You can't write, not because you're stupid, but because you were never taught. No one taught you to string letters, just firewood. But you still take notes, in your own way, silently. No ink, no parchment, no one sees. Every callus on your hand is a paragraph. Every stain on your tunic is a question mark you never got to ask. You remember the time Plato said, "Knowledge only begins when we know how to articulate it." You looked at your hand, holding a scorched wooden ladle, and thought, "Mine begins with burnt soup at the bottom of a pot." You once tried holding a pen. Awkward, like cradling a stray cat. The first word you wrote was "me," a crooked, smudged mess, but it was yours. Then Plato walked by. He looked, smiled faintly, said, "That expression is a distortion of the self." You erased it, and since then, you've only recorded with your hands, your back, your breath, when washing robes. You remember who always spills the olive oil. When mopping floors, you count whose steps leave marks. When washing dishes, you can tell the diligent student's cup from the lazy ones. You remember it all. No paper needed, because no one gives you permission to forget. When night falls, you carve every thought into memory. Every emotion is a character. Every sigh, a line break. You tell stories to yourself, in whispers. And call it soul notes. Once you dared to quietly ask Aristotle, if someone can't write, but remembers everything, are they still wise? Aristotle frowned, then gave a reply too long. You couldn't remember, only that you got 3 days of courtyard duty. You have no library, only a wood cupboard. Inside it, you hide a small stone, smooth like a child's first thought. When tired, you take the stone out, touch it, and think, this is my dictionary. You don't know letters, but you know who's kind by how they hold a ladle. You read emotions by the weight of a breath, and you write it all down, unseen, but still there. Had notes for those never allowed to speak. Notes so you don't disappear, because sometimes memory doesn't need writing to be real. It just needs to be held. With every piece of your body left after a day cleaning philosophy, you don't know letters, but you've never forgotten who you are. When the house of philosophy falls quiet, that's when you begin to exist. No more mind-bending questions. No more Plato rehearsing his lecture on immutable essence for the 10th time. No more dog of doubt grumbling in the kitchen corner. Only the oil lamp is not bright, just enough for you to see your hands are still there, still calloused, still rough, still trembling a little from the cold and from no one asking. You don't do anything, just sit, leaning against the wooden pillar, the one everyone leans on, except the philosophers. You don't think about anything, just breathe, as if breathing softly enough might keep the world from demanding an explanation. Old Plato once said, silence is the foundation of all truth. You think, maybe he's right. But his silence leads to a question. Yours is because if you speak again, you might cry. The oil lamp flickers, you flinch, as if even the light is hesitant about existing. You think of your mother. She used to light the lamp with emotions so simple you never forgot. Left hand shielding the wind, right hand tilting the flame, eyes unblinking. Because light, like hearts, extinguishes when stared at too hard. You sit there, in the house of philosophy, where everything must be defined, analyzed, compared. And you, with all your roughness, can't be defined. No one even tries. You don't want to be a philosopher. You just want a place where you can sit without being asked, why did you choose that spot? And for a moment, you think, maybe the oil lamp understands you better than Plato. It doesn't ask who you are, doesn't ask for proof of awareness. It just shines. When you need it, you place your hand near the flame, not too close, or you'll burn, not too far, or you'll freeze, and you tell yourself, tomorrow, even if I have to wash robes again, I'll still know who I am, because when all philosophy has gone to sleep, only the silent ones remain to keep the fire through the night. If you're still listening, then maybe you're also one of those who rarely speak. Someone who knows how to clean floors, both literally and metaphorically. Someone who, if they vanished tomorrow morning, the house would still be clean, but missing something. Come, quiet. You don't need to be good at reasoning. You don't need to memorize Plato's dialogues. You don't need to know what the ultimate form of existence even means. You just need to still feel. When the oil lamp flickers, You just need to go quiet for a moment. When a dream gets censored, that's enough. Maybe you're not allowed to speak, but no one can stop you from dreaming. No one can stop you from thinking about a place where you don't have to answer a single question, just to rest. And if you're lying there, in the dark of a quiet room, I hope my voice isn't a disturbance, but just a breath nearby, whispering, "You are not invisible. You are the one who cleans the floors of philosophy, the one who brings water for understanding, the one who bears the weight of what's called truth, while no one bears the weight on your back." Next story, Orpheus and Eurydice. You're curled up on a lumpy slab of rock somewhere in the forests of Thrace. Your back lets out a soft string of groans, almost like the stones beneath you are also sighing in protest. Light trickles through the tall leaves above like lazy drops of honey. Overhead, birds sing something in a language you don't understand, but your heart nods along. There's no pillow, just a mossy tree root doing a decent job. A young deer just peeked at you, its eyes wary, as if asking, is this scruffy, tangled-haired creature a forest spirit, or just a lost dreamer? The answer is both. The morning wind brushes your neck like a cold, familiar touch. You pull your cloak tighter, a woolen piece already old, smelling of dry sweat, wild grass, and a bit of poetry. Far away is the sound of a stream, trickling like someone tuning harp strings. Closer to you, only breath, your breath, and the forest breath. You sigh and sit up, your spine cracking like old wood. A nearby tree drops a leaf, as if also waking up. You're not sure what year it is, but you know one thing for certain. There's no Wi-Fi, just forest, just you and your lyre, resting beside you like a pet that waited all night. You don't know how today will begin, but one thing is clear. If anything is worth saying, you'll sing it. You are Orpheus. The child poetry chose to reincarnate. You don't remember exactly when you were born. You just remember that the other men in the village had names like Rock Splitter, Snake Smasher, or 5 days no sleep net puller. And you sang. And the deer in the forest sat down to listen. You had no sword, no silver armor, no warhorse, no fan page. You only had a lyre, and strangely, when you played, the water stilled, the leaves froze, and the rocks wept. Yes, rocks. People say you're the son of Calliope, muse of poetry. Others say your father is Apollo, the god of light, music, and I do everything without sleeping. Honestly, you're not sure. You just remember that ever since you knew how to breathe, you've known how to hum. When you were little, you didn't know you were different. You just knew. You didn't match the market's rumble, the cow's moos, or the sound of axes chopping wood. You only matched with sounds that lingered once. You sang along with thunder, and your mother said, since you came, even storms seem to think more deeply. You once got scolded by your teacher for singing while learning the alphabet, but the blackboard echoed like a drum, and you couldn't resist a sad tune on chalk. Mothers in the village whispered, this boy's dangerous. He doesn't cry when punished. He hums. You once sang to earn extra dried fish and succeeded. You even got a squid as bonus because your voice reminds me of my ex-wife. One day, you wandered into the sacred forest where kids weren't allowed, but instead of getting lost, you sat down and sang to a bush. And perhaps, for the first time in the forest history, the leaves didn't fall from wind, but from emotion. You sang at funerals, and the dead seemed to sleep more peacefully. You sang at weddings, and made the bride cry at her own table. You sang during summer noons, when heat silenced even breath, and made the whole village go quiet, like someone poured cool water into their hearts. The first time you sang in the village market, an old man fainted thinking a god had descended. A baby cried, believing you cursed it with your baritone. But then, they listened so hard they forgot to sell fish, forgot to fight over wine debts. As a child, you thought everyone could hear the world like you did. You heard the wind not with your ears but with your heart. You felt your heart break bit by bit watching a mother deer lick her frozen baby. And then you sang. Not to be praised, but to keep from exploding. Pindar, the great poet, once called you the father of poetry. You just saw yourself as a dreamy guy with an old lyre and a heart that's always a bit too soft. One time, you sang at Delphi's temple. Your notes rang out, and snakes slithered from the rocks, not to strike, but to listen. Old folks, kids gathered. No one remembered what you sang, only that when it ended, no one dared breathe, afraid to disturb the final note floating in the air. You once loved a tree. It leaned toward you whenever you came. Until someone cut it down to build a public bathhouse. You sang a farewell to a tree, and everyone cried, even the one who chopped it. That's you, Orpheus, not a hero, not a god. Just someone who sings until nature adjusts its feelings. If you were there on a foggy afternoon deep in the Thrace forest, you'd see a young man by the stream, eyes half closed, fingers strumming like picking up memories from a past life. No audience around, just stones, trees, deer, and the sky. But you'd realize you don't need an audience to make a great song. You just need to sing, and the stones will melt. You once thought your singing was enough, that just music and words would be enough to soothe the world. Until the day she walked in, not with a voice, but with a presence that made even the wind stop in its tracks. Her name was Eurydice. It sounded like a stray note in an unfinished melody, and then you knew that was the note you'd always been looking for. She didn't talk much, not like those muses who flirted with poetry. She arrived on a windless afternoon while you were strumming beside a hillside. No big laughs, no effort to impress, just light like early mist and sad like a song you'd never written. They say you first saw Eurydice dancing in a field, not for an audience, but like she was speaking to the grass with her toes. You strummed a slow phrase. She turned, not surprised, just nodded, as if to say, I've been listening to you for a long time. She didn't silence the world with power. She calmed it, like everything wanted to hush just to hear her breathe. Even birds sang lower, afraid to disturb the rhythm of her heart. You'd never seen anyone make the whole forest hold its breath. The first time you two talked, no words were said. You both just looked at a sparrow struggling to tug a leaf off a branch, then laughed when it slipped and tumbled down, like the world had just shared a private joke. You know you really love someone when they walk by and you forget the chord you were playing, or when they nod instead of greeting, and your heart says, "That's enough." Your wedding wasn't grand. No god showed up, except for the wind, and birds, and warm sunlight draped across your shoulders like a thin scarf. You played, she danced, and the world paused just long enough for you to believe. Maybe happiness needs nothing more than sky, music, and two people who can close their eyes at the same time. She wasn't a goddess. She wasn't a victim. She was the song you never wanted to end. But fate has no replay button. You once said, "If I had to choose between losing my voice and losing her, I'd learn how to be silent." You didn't know. The world was about to hold you to that, and Eurydice, the girl who stepped into your song, would soon become the quietest part of your love ballad. You once thought your singing was enough, that just music and words would be enough to soothe the world. Until the day she walked in, not with a voice, but with a presence that made even the wind stop in its tracks. Her name was Eurydice. It sounded like a stray note in an unfinished melody, and then you knew that was the note you'd always been looking for. She didn't talk much, not like those muses who flirted with poetry. She arrived on a windless afternoon while you were strumming beside a hillside. No big laughs, no effort to impress, just light like early mist and sad like a song you'd never written. They say you first saw Eurydice dancing in a field, not for an audience, but like she was speaking to the grass with her toes. You strummed a slow phrase. She turned, not surprised, just nodded, as if to say, "I've been listening to you for a long time." Your wedding wasn't grand. No god showed up, except for the wind. And birds, and warm sunlight draped across your shoulders like a thin scarf. You played, she danced, and the world paused just long enough for you to believe. Maybe happiness needs nothing more than sky, music, and two people who can close their eyes at the same time. She wasn't a goddess. She wasn't a victim. She was the song you never wanted to end. But fate has no replay button. You once said, "If I had to choose between losing my voice and losing her, I'd learn how to be silent." You didn't know. The world was about to hold you to that. And Eurydice, the girl who stepped into your song, would soon become the quietest part of your love ballad. No one warned you. No cryptic sign from the stars. No strange dream that jolts you awake at midnight. Just one day, that seemed like any other, turned out to be the day your world broke in half. Eurydice went for a walk alone. You were busy playing the lyre at a small wedding in a nearby village. The wind wasn't strong, the sky wasn't grey. Everything was peaceful, suspiciously so. She ran across the field. A strange man followed, not out of love, but out of desire, the kind that has no ears and doesn't hear music. Eurydice panicked. She ran faster. And then, a snake, hidden in the damp grass. Not a god. Not a curse, just nature, neutral, ruthless, and perfectly timed. The bite was clean, silent, like a note falling into a permanent silence, like a cosmic delete key pressed without hesitation. She collapsed, a misstep, a hand grasping at air, and she fell like a petal that drops without announcing the end of a season. The smell of wild grass rose like a last exhale. The wind stopped or dropped to a lower register. A bird sang offbeat, then fell silent. Maybe the sky didn't really dim, but inside, everything felt slightly less bright. You were playing music in the other village. Suddenly, your finger slipped on the string. No reason. Just something was wrong. The sound shattered like a bird flying through your mind, and you knew. The melody had lost the only listener you truly cared about. They ran to bring you the news. You didn't ask why, you asked where. When you arrived, Eurydice was already cold as stone under your hand, but her lips still curved slightly, as if she had just heard a familiar tune. You knelt down, placed your hand on her heart and sang. Not to wake her, but to keep the last note of her lingering in the air just a little longer. That song didn't melt stone, but it made the muses cry. Dionysus, the god of parties, stopped drinking for 5 minutes. Even the sun, if you look closely, dimmed a bit. You didn't bang your head, didn't scream. Just quietly took your lyre and walked toward the sunset like someone who had just realized this world was never made for musicians, and fate, the one rewriting your life's melody, was just beginning to change the key. Since then, every note you play carries her shape within it, and every time you close your eyes, you see a door. You don't know where it opens, but you know you will have to walk through. No one warned you. No cryptic sign from the stars. No strange dream that jolts you awake at midnight. Just one day, that seemed like any other, turned out to be the day your world broke in half. Eurydice went for a walk alone. You were busy playing the lyre at a small wedding in a nearby village. The wind wasn't strong, the sky wasn't grey, everything was peaceful, suspiciously so. She ran across the field. A strange man followed, not out of love, but out of desire, the kind that has no ears and doesn't hear music. Eurydice panicked. She ran faster, and then a snake, hidden in the damp grass. Not a god. Not a curse, just nature, neutral, ruthless, and perfectly timed. The bite was clean, silent, like a note falling into a permanent silence. She collapsed. Sunlight still shone. Birds still sang. Only you, somewhere else, felt your heart drop without knowing why. And you knew. No one had to tell you. They ran to bring you the news. You didn't ask why. You asked where, when you arrived, Eurydice was already cold as stone under your hand, but her lips still curved slightly, as if she had just heard a familiar tune. You knelt down, placed your hand on her heart and sang. Not to wake her, but to keep the last note of her lingering in the air just a little longer. That song didn't melt stone, but it made the muses cry. Dionysus, the god of parties, stopped drinking for 5 minutes. Even the sun, if you look closely, dimmed a bit. You didn't bang your head, didn't scream. Just quietly took your lyre and walked toward the sunset like someone who had just realized this world was never made for musicians, and fate, the one rewriting your life's melody, was just beginning to change the key. When you lost Eurydice, the world didn't go quiet. It kept being loud in the most inappropriate ways. People still gossiped. The town still buzzed with the sound of pestles pounding grain. Kids still played panpipes made of dry reeds. Only in your head did everything stop. A long white pause, like a stretch of music no one dares to finish. You tried to sing, but your voice didn't fly. It dropped right in front of you, shattering like an old ceramic cup. You tried to play the lyre, but your fingers wouldn't obey. Even your instrument knew you were trying to lie about your feelings. Then one night, you dreamed of a river with no banks, a black river, reflecting nothing. No moon, no stars, just water, flat like a memory that hasn't been remembered yet, on the shore. Thousands of sandals, no feet, but still the sound of footsteps. A dark gate, 3 dog heads barking like the heartbeat of the improperly buried. You woke in cold sweat. But inside, it was as bright as moonlight. If she was there, you would go. If that was the final door, you would sing until it opened. No one sings in the underworld. There are only groans, chains dragging, spirits arguing over old mistakes. But you arrived, with your lyre, with your voice, and for the first time in 1,000 years, Cerberus, the 3-headed dog guarding the gate of the underworld, yawned and curled up like a pup listening to a lullaby. All 3 heads tilted, as if judging pitch. One head cried, one yawned, the last dreamed of roast chicken bones. You didn't fight. You brought no sword, no spells. You just sang, and every door opened because it couldn't stand honesty. The souls looked up, confused. Some clutched their chests, thinking their hearts were still beating. Some trembled as they realized they were crying. Even though they'd been dead for 1,000 years, they thought they'd forgotten all emotion. But now they wept. A figure in a wide hat holding a scythe trembled in the shadows. You didn't need to introduce yourself. Hades had already heard. His eyes weren't cold, just old. So old you could hear wood rot inside his chest. Once, he knew music. Once, he loved. Now he stores everything in shadow, like a lyre hidden in a bottomless box. You kneeled, didn't beg, just told your story through music, a ballad in notes and tears. And the whole underworld paused to listen. You didn't know if Hades shed a tear, but Persephone, the queen of the dead, tilted her head, hand gently placed on her chest. Maybe that's how she cries. Hades nodded, but like all Greek gods, he never gives anything for free. "All right," he said, "but there is one condition. Don't turn around, don't look back, don't seek confirmation for what you believe." It sounded like a rule, but it also sounded like a trap. Like telling a musician to play the final song, but not to listen. And like every artist who has ever loved deeply, you agreed, without fully understanding what you were agreeing to lose. No one ever said Hades didn't appreciate music. He just rarely had a reason to open his heart. But your music wasn't a plea. It was a story, without excuse, without demand. And the strange thing is, the underworld, used to curses and final words, now fell silent to listen to your song. The light where Hades resides doesn't come from fire. It comes from memories burning slow, like embers still smouldering in the hearts of the dead. Each step beneath his throne holds a broken vow. Hades sits on his stone seat, emotionless, but not soulless. Beside him is Persephone, her hand still resting on her chest, as if she's holding on to the echo of your song. She doesn't cry, but her fingers gently rub her palm, like someone remembering what it felt like to hold a hand in the light. "I once heard music," Hades says, "but it's been a long time since anyone sang from loss, without asking for something in return." You bowed your head, no rebuttal, because you know those who have loved always recognize the sound of real love. He nodded, but his lips remained tight. The nod of a god is never trust. It is merely an opening that comes with a trap. It wasn't a nod of agreement. It was the nod of someone waiting for you to break your own promise. "You may take her back," Hades said, "but there is one condition. She will walk behind you, and you must not look back. You must not check. You must not confirm. You must not doubt. Don't look back, as if true love needs no proof, or as if those who truly love will always fail to resist checking." Hades doesn't need to force it, because he knows anyone who walks in darkness will eventually turn around, if the one behind them matters enough. You smiled faintly, the sad smile of someone handed hope with a rope around their neck. Persephone looked at her husband, then looked at you, her gaze like an ellipsis stretched long. You wanted to ask, but didn't, because you knew. If a goddess doesn't answer, it means the question is too real to be explained. You stood, thanks unspoken. Your fingers touched the strings. A melody rose, thin as trust, but bright as a road home. The air behind you softened, as if someone just exhaled gently into the space you left open. Eurydice was somewhere behind you, not calling, not rushing forward, just walking quietly, as if even dreams feared being awakened. You walk, and the world becomes soundless, not because there is no noise, but because your head now holds only one piece of music. One rhythm only, step, and don't look back. The underworld has no wind, but you can still feel something moving behind you, like a light shadow drifting along, silent, patient, fragile as early winter mist. You know it's Eurydice, but you're not sure. And the scariest thing in the world isn't not knowing, it's almost knowing. Each step you take rings out like a vow, and every silence behind you is a hanging question. You don't hear the rustle of a dress, you don't hear footsteps, you don't hear a call, a breath, a whisper. You only hear yourself and the silence squeezing. You tell yourself, she's there, she's there. Each step repeats like a mantra. You imagine her hands reaching out, just one breath behind your back. You imagine her eyes watching you, gentle, trusting, waiting. You imagine, because you're not allowed to know. Hades said, don't look back. But no one told you how to silence the echoes inside, the soft knocking on your heart. What if she fell? What if this is a trick? What if it's just been you all along? Persephone once stayed silent. Now you understand why. Because there are words, if spoken, that would shatter every hope left echoing. You're walking out of the dark, but each step pulls you deeper into yourself. A climb inside, more than through soil. A test no one scores, but you. You walk like someone carrying someone else's heart, careful, trembling, desperate for proof. But a promise comes with no receipt. You keep it, or you don't. No one knows, no one judges, except the eyes that are somewhere behind you, and you still haven't dared turn to find out. You sit by the riverbank, where souls once jostled for space. Now you are the only one, and unnecessary. The ferryman looks at you for a long time, not angry, not pitying. He just says one thing. Rules are rules. You don't answer. 'Cause what is there to say to a river that only flows one way, and a soul no longer with you to hear your explanation? You stay there for 7 days. No food, no singing, no sleep. Just sitting, as if by not moving, time would stop too, so Eurydice could make it back in time. Other souls pass by, some whisper, another one who turn back. Some lower their heads, as if they too once did the same, just without anyone to turn back for. Cerberus walks by, sniffs, then leaves. Even the 3-headed dog knows when a heart has lost its scent of hope. Hades doesn't show. Persephone says nothing. Hermes has probably returned to the sky. The door is closed, and you don't hear a lock click. Just the feeling. It was never meant to reopen. You return to the living world. A journey longer than the descent. Not because the road is steep, but because every step you carry something that never had weight before. Silence. The silence of someone who once stood right behind you, but you dared not speak their name. The silence of a promise broken by doubt alone. You walk out of the underworld, but leave a part of yourself behind. The part that believed love was strong enough not to need proof. The part that thought if the song was beautiful enough, fate might soften. The door doesn't open again, not because it's locked, but because the one meant to walk through it is no longer there. Only you remain, and the questions no one will answer, and the lyre, now with no hands to play it, and no heart left to make it tremble. You return to the world above. No one waits, no flowers, no birdsong, only wind. but it brings nothing but indifference. Fingers that once made stone weep now can't find the first chord. You look at your lyre as if it were a relic, something that once lived, once trembled, once shone, and is now cold ash. You don't sing anymore, not because you can't, but because there is nothing left you want to say. Music was once a bridge. Now it's a stabbing beat whenever you remember her. And each time you play, it's like your blood flows backward. You reject the festivals, reject your friends, reject yourself. You drift like a shadow, and your breath is quieter than a bird's nap. But the world doesn't like silence. An ancient Greek society where men are praised for loving, but also for forgetting, likes even less a man who refuses drunk women. There are girls who try to come close. They dance, they laugh, they breathe hard, as if sound alone could shatter your stillness. But you don't look, don't respond, don't sing. You are not silent out of pride. You are silent like a farewell left unsaid, and that becomes an insult with no sound. One night they come, unannounced. The party is over. Wine stains their lips. Moonlight breaks in pieces across their hair. They don't smile, don't invite. They just step forward and tear you apart like a melody shredded measure by measure. You don't scream. Don't run, because you died the moment you turn back. Your head floats down the river, the lyre beside it, and together they still sing. A sad song, with no words, no ending, because true pain doesn't need accompaniment. Only silence deep enough to hear your own heart still, cracking. Death came not by blade, but by memory. No screaming, no curses. Just you sitting down one day and knowing the last song had been sung long ago. They found your body scattered, like notes fallen off a stave. Your head floated on the river Hebrus, alongside your loyal lyre. They say the river itself learned to shiver, because each time the waves touched the strings, a sound rose like a cry with no one left to cry it. The lyre was not broken. It still rang, without player, without wind. Only sorrow had once been seeded in each string, and your head, lips still slightly parted, as if the final verse had yet to be sung. An unfinished love song, ending mid-chorus, and no one ever finds out if hope was still possible. No funeral was held, because no one knew who was worthy to bid farewell to someone who had already said too many goodbyes. The muses, your sisters not by blood, gathered the pieces. They did not wail. They simply passed through the lands you once sang in and left behind a story, an echo, a nameless memory. You did not become a hero. No great temple, no medals, only birds flying over the mountains would suddenly go quiet, as if still hearing your final song. Your death was not carved in stone, but it lingered in the air, and those who once listened would never truly forget. Because some voices don't need to live to echo forever. When your head and your lyre drift to the end of the river, even the waves dare not push too hard. Even the water bulls before something that once stirred the underworld. the Muses, those elder sisters full of compassion, walk to the riverbank. No one speaks, no one cries. They silently gather each bone, each string of the lyre, each lingering note still hanging in the air. They take the lyre to the sky, not because you were a god, but because no place on earth was quiet enough to keep a voice that once sang through death itself. And then it became the constellation Lyra. Each night, if you look up at just the right moment, you'll see a thin glimmer, like a string of a lyre. It doesn't shine brightly. It doesn't claim center stage. It simply hums in light, a song no one remembers the words to anymore. They say, if you stay silent long enough, on moonless nights, you might hear that lyre's echo drifting down, not clearly, not close, but just enough to remind you some melodies don't need a singer to live on, because they were once sung with a whole soul. And you, the rest of you, were buried beneath stone. No grave, no name, just an old slab covered in moss, and a nightingale that often comes to sing each morning. Some say it sings your song, others say it is you. But either way, that song still goes on, even though you've gone silent, and that is all a storyteller can ever hope for. If you love someone but can no longer see them, no longer touch them, no longer hear their voice, is it still love? Orpheus wasn't sure, but he chose to believe it was, because the only thing left in his heart was Eurydice. No form, no reply, just the feeling that she was still somewhere, silent and quiet. They said he was foolish to turn back. They called it a mistake. But ask yourself this: if you walk through the dark and the one you love is right behind you, wouldn't you turn around just once to be sure they're still there? Those who haven't loved call it failure. Those who have understand its instinct. Orpheus wasn't a god. He wasn't born to obey divine laws. He was born to sing of beauty, and beauty always walks hand in hand with fragility. And love, when it has no evidence, is the deepest kind. It doesn't rely on shadows. It doesn't need answers. It only needs a memory warm enough to hold the whole world together. Someone once asked, did he really love her? If he couldn't trust she'd follow. The answer lies in that very fear. Because sometimes we love so deeply, we're afraid to wait one more step. We turn around, not because we doubt them, but because we doubt ourselves, whether we're still worthy of being loved at all. Love has no proof, but Orpheus left proof in every note he played, every trembling breath, and in every whispered story passed from listener to listener. People don't need to see Eurydice. They only need to hear the song Orpheus once sang, and they'll know she was real. And that is the most beautiful kind of evidence. An absence, that says everything. Have you ever heard the phrase, curiosity killed the cat? But in ancient Greece, curiosity didn't kill, it punished. Prometheus was chained for daring to steal fire for mankind. Pandora opened the box. Odysseus was trapped at sea just because he wanted to hear the sirens sing. And Orpheus, he just turned around, just once, a movement as natural as breathing. But in that moment, the world collapsed. Not because he was wrong, but because he was human. In Greek mythology, imperfection is not forgiven. You must either be a god or a lesson. Orpheus, sadly, was the most beautiful lesson the heart ever made. For centuries, people have debated, was Orpheus too weak, lacking faith? But the truth is, he didn't doubt Eurydice. He doubted himself, and that is what we all do. Every time we love, every time we promise, every time we walk through darkness hoping someone is walking behind us, everyone will turn around, not because we need proof, but because we're afraid of being left behind again. If Hades had a hint of mercy, he would have known that. If the world were fair, Eurydice would have crossed the threshold before he looked back. But this is mythology, and mythology needs tragedy. Orpheus didn't look back out of a lack of love, but because his love was so big, he didn't know where else to put it but in his eyes. And sometimes, what makes us lose everything is not a wrong action, but sincerity placed in the wrong moment. You can blame him, you can cry for him, you can write songs in his memory, but don't forget, you would turn back too, because you're human too. If you're hearing this at 3 a.m, and you're walking, not down a street, but through your own mind, then maybe you understand Orpheus more than anyone else. Because who among us hasn't walked through darkness, just hoping someone is still behind us? You don't need to descend into the underworld. Just getting through a bad day without collapsing, that's already an epic. If you've ever loved someone so much that the fear of losing them made you scared to believe they were still there, then you've lived the same melody as Orpheus. Keep walking, even if you see nothing, even if you're not sure of anything. Sometimes, love. And if you're still awake, if your eyes are still open in a quiet room, then this chapter is for you. You don't need to be Orpheus. You don't need a liar. You don't need a lover in the underworld. Just a heart that once knew pain and still beats. There are losses that don't need repeating. They don't live in the story. They live in the spaces between the words, like Eurydice, no longer present, but still in every line. Orpheus sang, not to be heard, but to fill the silence between two souls who once called each other's names. You too, you live, not to be recognized, but so that one day someone might walk by quietly and understand you without needing explanation. A song doesn't need a listener, just like love doesn't need proof. Just like you, still existing even if no one texts you at midnight. You sing, even when your voice is just a breath. You love, even if they no longer remember your name. And that is why Orpheus never truly died. He just sang softer, so you could sleep better. Good night. Not because the world is gentle, but because you deserve a dream that doesn't break. Let that song follow you, not needing to be heard, not needing to be understood. I just know it never really went silent. Good night. May your steps be forward and your song unbroken.